Hello and welcome to the next in the series of the virtual classes brought to you by the Smithville Area Chamber of Commerce and the Smithville Public Library. We have with us today Judy Bergeron, our library director, who's going to talk to us a little bit about our funding partners. Judy?
Thank you very much, April. I'm pleased to be here as part of this project that is funded by the Institute for Museum and Library Services through the Texas State Library and Archives Commission. And it has enabled us through a COVID response grant to bring some wonderful virtual training classes that you can view real time or later and learn a lot about how your business can stay viable throughout this pandemic crisis. So thanks for helping us present it, April, and welcome, Stacy.
Thank you, Judy. As we have people logging in today in our live video class, remember that there is an option at the bottom of your screen. Just click on chat and you can type in questions that you have for our presenter anytime throughout the presentation, and then she will address those questions after she completes her presentation. Today, we're very excited to be welcoming Stacy Savage, who's here to talk with us about food waste reduction. Stacy was born and raised in the Beaumont-Port Arthur area of Southeast Texas, where her parents worked at oil refineries for a collective 75 years. Her personal experience with air pollution and cancers in her family guided her professional career path to empower others to protect the planet. Ms. Savage has been a Texas waste nerd, I like that word used, for 17 years, starting in 2003 as a grassroots door-to-door community organizer tackling local landfill expansion issues in Austin. She played a pivotal role in passing two key pieces of statewide legislation for the free and responsible recycling of toxic electronics, known as the 2007 Texas Computer Take-Back Law. As a co-founder and former chair of the Austin Zero Waste Alliance, she helped pass Austin's Universal Recycling Ordinance, which requires business recycling and food waste diversion, as well as Austin's Single-Use Bag Ordinance, Construction and Demolition Debris Recycling Ordinance, and Curbside Compost Collection Ordinance. From 2015 to 17, Ms. Savage served as a City Council appointee on the Austin Zero Waste Advisory Commission. Her peers on the commission elected her as their representative on the Joint Sustainability Committee, allowing her to provide a deeper level of service to the community. In 2013, Ms. Savage founded Zero Waste Strategies, an environmental consulting firm specializing in business waste reduction to drive increased revenue, deeper customer loyalty, employee empowerment, and a green marketing edge. Her client list includes Nestle Purina, Kohler, Dell Technologies, AT&T, and the City of Austin. Ms. Savage has lived in the Austin area for the past 20 years and has recently moved 30 miles east to the pine forested area of Bastrop with her husband, John, and their fur baby, Willie, the pit bull rescue. Welcome, Stacy, and thank you for being our instructor today. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Thank you, Stacy.
Well, great. Well, thank you for having me and reading my life story. I'm going to go ahead and share screen now, and we'll pull up the presentation here. Can you see that?
Yes, I can see that just fine.
Okay, perfect. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. As April stated, my name is Stacy Savage, and I'm the founder and CEO of Zero Waste Strategies. We're an environmental consulting firm, and we target specifically zero waste, which we will go over the definition of that here in the presentation. And we will also define ways that businesses can help support the new emerging circular economy. And so moving on with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Zero Waste Strategies presents food waste reduction for businesses. So as April stated a little earlier, our client list, we work with large companies, mid-size and small companies, local government agencies, and nonprofit organizations. So When I had mentioned earlier regarding the circular economy, what we're really doing is redefining our production model. So currently we're in a linear production model. And what that means is that we extract raw resources, we produce them into products, we distribute them to retailers, consumers buy them off those shelves, use them up, and then dispose of them. Most of the materials that are used are from raw products like crude oil that you can mold into plastics. You'll see here, you know, the lumber industry and extreme pollution scenarios that we're looking at, because we have a model that is, you know, point A to point B. Now, what the circular economy states is that we take point A and point B, join them together, and make a loop. So the circular economy allows for the reuse, repair, remanufacturing, reproduction, refabrication of materials and giving them multiple lifespans. So part of the loop is what's called zero waste. And zero waste is a basic business concept that has recently made landfall in Texas about, I'd say about 10 years ago. And we've seen cities like Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, Arlington, San Antonio, Houston make these public commitments to getting to zero waste. And what that means is it's defined as a global goal of 90% or more waste diversion from landfills and incinerators by 2040, or even sooner. If we can do more than 90%, even better. But those are the goals, 90 by 2040. And so you'll see here how the linear production model has been shifted into a loop here on the left where the zero waste system states that we are shifting subsidies, designing for the environment, focusing on clean production and distribution, educating and empowering consumers about how their dollar works and the value of the vote of your dollar, really going with companies that have stated green goals and are applying them to their operations. And once the empowered consumer is done with their products, they can send them to resource recovery centers, which is just another word for a recycling plant. But this also puts the responsibility on the producer of those products so that they can, in the innovation and design phase, they can design their products for recycling after the empowered consumer has used them. So there's take-back programs like we've stated with electronics, computers and televisions that we have here in Texas. So this is producing jobs, and it is holding our government officials accountable as well to quality of life. So there's a model called the Wasteberg, and the Wasteberg states that for every pound of waste that we produce at the curb for pickup, there are actually 71 pounds of waste that were produced upstream in making that pound. And so, you know, one key thing to understand is that landfills, which Texas has almost 200 active landfills, these landfills are one of the largest sources of greenhouse gases, or GHGs. And methane from organic waste is 21 to 72 times more potent than the carbon dioxide released in our atmosphere. So whenever methane is released from these landfills, you can imagine the impact in the upper layers of the atmosphere. So 90% reduction of waste would be equivalent to removing 21% of US coal-fired power plants. So moving on, we want to talk about organic waste which we want to talk about food waste, which is under a more umbrella category called organic waste. Now, when we're talking about the term organic, it does not mean the organic section in your grocery store. This means something that came from either a plant or an animal. So these things, the graphic on the left here, you can see all this yard waste that was produced, somebody's yard, a landscaping company, whatnot. So all of that green waste is organic waste, but what is also organic is the brown paper sack that it's in. And so on the right, you can see other examples, food waste, and even the carton that is in is a paper eggshell carton. So that is something that would be considered organic waste as well. So we're talking fruit and veggie peels, bones and shells from your shellfish, paper towels, yard clippings, and even manure. So this kind of food waste prevention goes way, way, way back. Since the Depression era of the early 1900s. You can see these kind of old-timey advertisements to help educate people on how to not waste food and how to ensure that their family is being good stewards of the food that they do buy. So we want to kind of carry this thinking over to more modern times with businesses being able to also do their part. It's not just about what people are doing in their own households, it's how are businesses also reducing their waste. So buckle up, because we have some pretty shocking statistics on food waste across the US. So in addressing organic waste, you'll see this graph here is from a 2015 City of Austin community-wide waste diversion study. And you can see the vast majority of the graph is organic material, food waste, yard waste, paper waste. And so the national average of food waste in America is about 30 to 40%. So City of Austin is sitting right in there. You can see that about 15% is office paper, newspaper, 5% plastic, 3% metals, 3% glass. So what they did was a waste audit, and they literally picked through thousands of pounds of waste, and they categorized each material into these kinds of materials that categories that you see on the graph here. And they were able to weigh and calculate. And that 2015 study can be found on the City of Austin website, and it's quite insightful. So 25% of our fresh water supply is used to produce food that goes to waste. And that is just a travesty. So inside of the 1.3 billion tons of food waste every year worldwide, there are 43 trillion gallons of water used to produce that. And it is really staggering to think, or to even conceptualize in your own brain what that would look like. We go through droughts here in Texas, and it's really critical that we are much more conscientious of our water use and not letting that water use go to waste because we have let our food go to waste. The amount of food wasted in the US each day, not year, each day would fill the Rose Bowl Stadium. So that represents about $165 billion each year in wasted food. Now, one thing that we want to address is COVID issues. So since the pandemic, we've had a big shift. Restaurants have gone offline, they're coming back online, and it's really critical that businesses understand where they can cut costs. And reducing your food waste is probably the top way that you can cut costs. But we also have to think about food insecurity as well as a community. So before the coronavirus pandemic, there were more than 35 million people who struggled with hunger in the US, including more than 10 million children. So now, with the pandemic, about 54 million people, including 18 million children, may experience food insecurity. And that is directly from Feeding America. That's a national food rescue and distribution group. So businesses can really do their part by following what's called the food recovery hierarchy. So you look at the top there, the most preferred, all the way down to the bottom, which is the least preferred. And so at the top, we're looking at source reduction. This is like smart inventory, first in, first out food going in, whatever you put into the walk-in cooler first is the first thing that you take out regarding the recipes that you'll be making either for the day or for the week. And then food dating, proper food dating is really critical so that there's a reduction in spoilage. Next is feeding hungry people. So food bank donations, we will go over legal food donations later here in the presentation. You are protected by the federal government to make food donations from your business, and you can get a tax write-off, which is pretty neat. And then the next in the hierarchy is feeding hungry animals. This is food that is no longer consumable by humans, but is still good to feed to animals. And so you can partner with farmers and ranchers in the area to do an exchange and keep that food waste out of your landfill trash. Next is industrial uses. This would be biofuels. So like yellow grease, there are several companies in Central Texas that do convert yellow fry grease into a biofuel that can actually power your car if your car is converted correctly. And then also beautification. This would be where businesses, let's say you're a landscaping business and you get all the wood chips, you donate that to the city, and they use that for beautification on roadways, in the medians. They use it for erosion control. There's all sorts of things that we can do in industrial uses as well with organic waste. And then finally, before landfilling is composting. And that would be where you can either have kind of a backyard composter if you're at home, or if you have a business that you can use an industrial facility who will come and pick up your compost materials. And they use windrows and biodigesters. Biodigesters we'll get into just a little bit later. And then you can see at the very end, incineration or landfill. This is the absolute last resort and what I like to call burn and bury. So let's go over some ways to reduce food waste, some everyday activities. So one thing that you can do, and this is something that you can also do at home if you choose, if you've got the space at your business location, great. But really, oops, excuse me, I accidentally went the wrong way. Really growing your own is a great way to reduce costs. It provides really some instant access to nutritional and seasonal produce and herbs. It's really a great learning experience. Let's say that you've got a garden in your backyard and you use that to teach your kids about where food comes from and how to get into the dirt and what worms do. That's a great bonding experience. But if you've got property that would be able to facilitate that, think about doing raised bed boxes like you see here. All of this is on top of gravel. So if you really don't even have the best land for it, you can make these or purchase these kinds of grow boxes where you can get them filled up with the right type of soil, even if it's on concrete or asphalt or even gravel. So any excess you could use for canning operation or storage. You can even share it with neighbors, or food banks would be glad to have it. And also any leftover food waste actually becomes compost for the next growing season. So you can use that to turn it into a compost material that you use to amend the soil, and you can put the nutrients back into the soil. A couple of examples to look toward. In Austin, there is Hillside Pharmacy and Boggy Creek Farms. These are two grow operations that also kind of do farm to table. Another one was East Side Cafe. It's pretty famous. It was around for about 40 years, but they just closed down. I believe the owner's retiring, but it's another really good example to look into these kind of farm to table examples. So next is what we call the grocery cycle. And this goes both for businesses and at home. So the first, we're going to take a look at the top left, and then we'll go down across to the right and then up to the top. So you always want to inventory your business food stocks. That's really kind of a standard operation, a standard business practice, is to see what you already have on hand before you make any purchases. After that, you'll want to kind of research and utilize recipes that will allow you to use materials or produce or proteins that you already have on hand. And in order to do that, you'll have to allow your chefs a little flexibility in the daily menu. The chefs and the kitchen managers know what's in that walk-in cooler. They know what's in that freezer. So have them be your ally in the kitchen to use produce and proteins that may about to spoil, but before they go to landfill, they're going to be used in a recipe that's something that you can sell. So instead of spending money, you're making money. Another way to look at your purchases is buying in bulk. A lot of businesses already do this. So especially for your dry goods, grains, pastas, beans, purchasing in bulk, also your frozen foods, meats, veggies, and then looking at food rotation. We talked about first in, first out, and proper dating, and making sure that you're using the produce and the proteins before they go to waste. And then think, sometimes for smaller operations, you'll want to purchase smaller orders a little more frequently. So let's say you've got a family of 5 at home, and you have several boxes of fruit that have gone to waste. Well, maybe next time you'll do your inventory, right? You'll go through this whole process. You'll see what you have on hand, what you can create for your family. Using what you already have on hand, being really creative, getting those recipes in your cooking repertoire, and then you're going to make smaller purchases more frequently. And that's even easier now that retail grocers are allowing for curbside pickup. And it's a whole new business model for them. So you can do more frequent pickups for your family before food goes to waste. Also looking at how to reuse your leftover materials from cooking. Do you have a reuse option where you can take scraps from your veggie peels and such, and use them for stocks or soups or sauces? And then for businesses, really, and actually homeowners too, donating non-perishables for good to nonprofits. A lot of nonprofits will do can drives where you can donate canned goods, but getting a little deeper into that regarding the federal protection for businesses who want to donate food to nonprofit organizations. We'll get into that in just a little bit. So one way to deal with food waste is, like we said at the bottom of the hierarchy, was compost. And this is where an industrial hauling service for food waste removal comes to your business. It picks up their can that you filled with your compostable food waste, and they take it away. They can usually take meat, bone, and dairy because at their facility, their windrows get so hot with the microbe production that they can usually break that type of thing down. So most of the time, your compost hauling services at industrial facilities will accept meat, bone, and dairy products. Another option for composting food waste, something to consider doing on site, either at home or at your business if you do have the space, is on-site composting. And this is where you kind of have a 3-bin system where you've got your green and brown yard waste on one side, you've got your food waste in the middle, and then your final composted fully broken down material on the end there. And you'll mix it in a way where you're balancing the carbon and nitrogen properly so that you do get a good cake-like material rather than a sludge that stinks. And then another way to do that is to consider vermicomposting, where you use worms to break down the materials. And there are companies out there here like Uncle Jim's Worm Farm, and yes, it is actually a thing. They sell these red wigglers, earthworms, mealworms, where you can put them in your compost heap and they'll help break it down for you. So that's one of the most natural ways. Both of these are obviously the most natural ways to go, but you may want to consider space constraints as well. Another way to handle, and this is more for your commercial kitchens, another way to handle that is from food biodigesting. So what you'll do is put your food waste in. There is usually a proprietary microbe mixture from the company that you purchase your biodigester from. And those microbes mixed with a little bit of water, they within 24 hours, what you'll get is gray water out, and it just goes down the drain that is attached to the municipal water supply. So it helps the city save water and to reclaim water. So as you'll see here, this biodigester is from a company called Orca. At the bottom left, you'll see my disclaimer that I actually have an affiliate sales agreement with Orca for discounts. So if you are interested in purchasing a biodigester, this one featured is called the OG50, and that means it can break down 50 pounds of food waste every hour. So you can only imagine and they've got 4 models. So you can only imagine how much easier it is than dealing with a compost system where you just have those little tiny microorganisms breaking everything down for you. You put the food in, gray water comes out. It's pretty neat technology. So I've got a little pop quiz here for you. We're going to test your compost knowledge. So true or false? And you can type it in the chat box, whichever your answer is. And I'll give you a couple of seconds to respond. So your first pop quiz question is about paper towels. Can paper hand towels be recycled, or should they be composted? Which one? True or false? Paper hand towels can be recycled but not composted. Which is your answer? All right, answer is false. And why? Well, paper hand washing towels should never be recycled. Unlike the long fibers in office paper, the fibers in paper towels have been what's called downcycled, and they're just too short to have any value to our recycling process or at the recycling plant. So they—
Well, thank you, Stacy. I just almost jumped in to answer, but then I thought, if I say yes, it's going to not be right. It's going to be no.
But they're excellent for compost, as they bring a mix to that wet dry balance. and so that it can help offset the wetness of the food waste. So that's something to consider. As well at all your hand washing stations. Instead of putting the used paper towel into the landfill trash, you can put it in a compost bin that's specifically designated. I've seen many hotels and office complexes do this. It would be just as applicable to back of the house and front of the house wash stations at a restaurant. So next pop quiz question is, industrial compost facilities can process meat, bone, and dairy.
True.
You're right. Now, there's some caveats here. If your city offers curbside compost pickup for businesses, it's likely that the program does allow meat, bone, and dairy, but you'll always want to check first with your hauler. Now, this is due to the facility's capacity for extremely high temperatures that we spoke of a little earlier. And then for a pro tip, never put meat, bone, and dairy in your backyard compost tumblers or community compost bins. They just don't get hot enough to break that down, and it will attract rodents or it will attract vermin. So next, speaking of rodents, not sure if you guys remember that scene from The Princess Bride, but they talk about rats of unusual size. So does composting attract rodents? And the answer is no, if you do it right. So if you're correctly balancing the percentage of dry materials that produce carbon and nitrogen, which is your yard waste, with the wet materials that provide the liquid, the food waste, when it starts to break down, you're not going to get that sludgy material. It turns into a dark, dense, really power-packed soil amendment that crumbles like a birthday cake. And so otherwise, you might get visitors like rodents, raccoons, flies, but also note that compost bins should have tight lids that use a clamp down or a screw-on feature. And that way you can hashtag outsmart those rodents. So what are some hacks for reducing food waste in the kitchen? One thing to note is the use by versus sell by versus best by date. It's all so confusing. So the dates are labeled on food products by the manufacturer, not the government. And so those dates by the manufacturer on your food packaging really points to the peak freshness level and when the quality of the product starts to decline. So the dates really don't have anything to do with food spoilage. Besides baby formula, there's really no other requirement by the FDA for expiration dates to even be on food. And so because of pushback from food manufacturers and food permitted businesses, the FDA is actually now supporting an industry-led effort to reduce confusion among consumers with a more consistent best if used by date instead. So something that will be much more uniform across the board so that we're not prematurely throwing food away because it's past the date that's stamped on the product packaging. That's not typically the food spoilage date. It's the food peak freshness date. So another way to mitigate food waste is to make sure that you're maintaining proper appliance temperatures. These are all in Fahrenheit. So for your and this is for your larger commercial kitchens or your back of house at a restaurant operation, catering operation. But for your walk-in refrigerators, you want to make sure that they're at 35 to 38 degrees. Your walk-in freezers need to be 0 to -10 degrees. And your reach-in freezers usually are 5 to -10 degrees. Of course, prevention is the cheapest method. So preventing the spoilage, preventing the mold strains and foodborne bacterial pathogens is really the best way to go. Another way to mitigate your food waste is food reuse and repurposing. So reuse, this is something where you can just kind of have a field day with your leftovers, convert it into something else. Repurposing, examples would be turning day-old bread into bread pudding, and maybe chopping them up and baking them, making salad croutons. Using your over-ripened avocados in your guacamole mixes, even soon to expire fruits, you can turn them into smoothies. And then obviously legally donating to local food banks is a really great way to go to help feed hungry people in our communities. So let's go over that Legal Food Donation Act. It's the Federal Good Samaritan Food Donation Act of 1996. And it provides limited liability protection for people who make good faith donations. And people can include entities in the definition in the law. It includes entities and businesses. So donations must be made in good faith to nonprofits that feed the hungry. And this act also provides limited liability protection, both civil and criminal, for those who distribute those food donations, such as the nonprofit food banks. And then obviously your donations must be following all safe food handling practices and temperature protocols through the health department. That's really critical. So you wouldn't want a box of frozen chicken sat out in the bed of your truck in July heat in Texas for 4 hours, and then you say, oh, we can't use this now, we'll donate it. That's not going to fly. So we don't want to get anybody sick. So it's critical that you use best operating procedures, how you would prepare any food for your customers. You would want to use those safe food handling protocols as well when it comes to food donations. Not to mention that you can also get a tax break. The tax break is retroactive back to, I believe, 2015, and where you can take, really put together a manifest of all of the food that you have donated. You'll want to weigh it on a scale and really track, how much in poundage that you've been able to donate. You'll be able to tally that up for the year, and you'll be able to report that on your taxes. I believe there's a 15% fair market value that you can receive back from those donations. The equivalent, fair market value. So something to consider as you start to consider your food donation process, and getting with like the Smithville Food Pantry, who actually works with the Central Texas Food Bank. The food bank, I believe, they service more than 10 counties, I believe, all across Central Texas. They're really wonderful, but just something to consider, keeping that food waste out of the landfill, keeping those greenhouse gas emissions down, feeding hungry people in our community, and getting a tax break on it. It sounds like a pretty good deal to me. Now, what about the holidays? This is where a lot of food waste happens in our homes, at recreational, vacation spots, at the office. So there's a lot to think about around holiday food waste. So we'll give you a couple examples here. So one way to reuse those old pumpkins, not old, but before they expire, you can really gut them and create a fresh pumpkin puree. You can do that by hand. You can use the string guts to make a batch of veggie broth. You can make some pumpkin candies and smoothies. You can compost it if you want to, and obviously, which is one of my favorites, is to pull out the seeds, roast them for a quick crunchy snack. So just some things to think about that you can do outside of kind of the seed baking process. There's several other things that you can do, and even turning it into a makeshift planter, hollowing out that pumpkin, putting some dirt in it, and then you can plant a flower or whatnot, which I think would be pretty cool looking on a front porch during the fall. So moving on, food reuse and repurposing. A secondary thing to consider is in 2016, there were about 6 million turkeys that wound up in the trash during the holiday season. And that's according to a national nonprofit, National Resources Defense Council. So one thing that you do, and this is something that I do every year during Thanksgiving, is to debone your turkey and get all that good meat off, and then you can boil down the carcass to create a soup stock and freeze it for later. I use that soup stock in a family recipe the next year. My husband has a really great family recipe for a turkey soup that we use the following year, and we keep it in our deep freeze all year. So just something to consider, the massive amounts of food waste around the holidays. How can we mitigate that? And so here are some helpful solutions at home that involve tech. So one thing to consider is using the ChooseMyPlate.gov website. And that provides food guides for all levels of health. It provides recipes that repurpose foods in 5 ways each. So there's a protocol for using yogurt 5 different ways, like who would have thought? It's a pretty neat website, and they just, I believe, just hit their 10-year anniversary. So it's been around for a little while. You can also find nutrition suggestions that correlate with your age, weight, height, etc. Another one, tech-wise, is downloading the Food Keeper app on your phone. This is something that helps you understand proper food and beverage storage, dates, and that type of thing to really maximize the quality and the freshness of your food items. This is something that was developed by the USDA Food Safety and Inspection Service, along with Cornell University and the Food Marketing Institute. It's a pretty neat app if you look into it. And then the Food Guestimator. This one is so cool. The Guestimator app, you can determine based on how many people are going to arrive at your party for the holidays. Let's consider you're throwing a big family party, or you've got an office party that you want to promote. You're going to count up how many RSVPs. You'll put that into the Food Guestimator app, and it'll calculate based on poundage, average poundage that people typically eat, you know, how much food you're going to need for the whole shebang. So they've got some money saving tips, some food freezing hacks, and ways to revive the food that's been frozen. So this is one of my favorites. And then obviously learning at your own pace is going to be really critical. These are new concepts for business owners. These are new ideas and ways to implement. So there's some tweaks that need to be made around business operations if this is the way that you want to take your business. So there are some really great resources here. The Zero Waste International Alliance is the global zero waste nonprofit that sets the goals and the standards and the definitions for what zero waste actually is. And then you have the US Green Building Council, and it might be off-putting a little bit with the name because in the beginning, the US Green Building Council really focused on building standards and energy and water conservation. But in 2017, I believe, 2016, zero waste protocols were actually folded into US Green Building Council protocols. And so you can actually get LEED standards or LEED certification with zero waste practices. And then there's the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the 5 Gyres Institute, and the Story of Stuff Project. Story of Stuff Project is a kind of little cartoon vignettes. It's really great for explaining large very hard to understand concepts regarding sustainability and conservation and that type of thing, boiling it down to a little cartoon vignette. This is something that kids really get into. So if you have any kids and you want to start imparting these practices or these concepts with them, Story of Stuff project is a great way to begin that journey. And so my final question is, if we're not for zero waste, how much waste are we for? So with that, that concludes my presentation, and here is my contact information. And then we can open it up for questions.
That's great, Stacy. Thank you. Boy, I've learned so much in that, in your presentation. It was quite a bit.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, that's good though. Yeah, and Jill Struby, she makes sure I know all about these issues all the time.
I bet she does. She's on top of it.
So I'm going to go ahead and start with the questions that have already been submitted. For those of you that are watching, please feel free to either type in your questions or you can unmute yourself and ask questions. But I'm going to go ahead and start with the questions that have been submitted. Are there ways that we can, in Smithville, use excess foods to feed folks, such as Meals on Wheels? And I know you've already addressed this under the issue of being able to donate food, but I also received a text question saying, just to clarify, if I make food at my restaurant, I can just donate that prepared food for programs like Meals on Wheels or the food pantry or those types of things?
Yeah, so donating prepared food is allowed as long as you have stuck to the time and temperature protocols of the health department. Now, let's say you're a Chinese buffet and you've put out all this food and your lunch rush is over. You can't take that food that's already been presented to the public, wrap it up and donate it. That would be a food health safety hazard. Somebody on that line, one of the customers, could have been sick. But what you can do is, if you have a tray of noodles or whatever, and you haven't used it, it's still in the walk-in cooler, it was never presented to the public, that's actually something you can weigh and put down in your spreadsheet manifest to track throughout the year how much you're donating. And then you can call up Meals on Wheels or the food bank or Central Texas Food Bank, Smithville, whoever that you can partner with locally, or maybe it's even a farmer or rancher. Let's get that food waste, make sure that it's not going to be landfilled, whatever we can do to keep, dramatically reduce the food waste going to the landfill trash bin is really the key. And the way that we do that is, repurposing, reuse, all of those re's that we were talking about previously, before composting, before landfill. So let's feed our community first.
So this particular company that is asking these questions, they specialize in casserole dishes.
Oh, good.
So if somebody came in and asked for the lunch special, which might be King Ranch casserole, for example. So they have that prepared in the back, and they prepare a plate for someone, mashed potatoes and gravy and a casserole and green beans, for example. All of that casserole that they have left over that was in the kitchen, being served from in the kitchen, those can be donated.
Yep.
Okay.
It sure can. Just need to be, again, health code, following health code, and making sure everything is wrapped and transported in a way that is safe.
Okay.
So keep in mind that good faith donations of apparently wholesome products. That's the definition of a food donation. And people and businesses are included in that protection.
And I have a question. We have an event coming up this weekend that is Smithville Empty Bowl. I'm sure you've heard of the Empty Bowl
yes,
project.
yeah.
So the bowl, the soups that are left over, we inevitably have soup left over. We pre-package all the soups and give people drive through and pick up their soups. But in the past, typically, we would have soups that servers would put into a bowl and hand to people as they walk through the line. So it's not a buffet style, the servers serve it. can those soups then be donated on after that type of event?
Yeah, if you can put them in some kind of, vacuum sealed packaging where you can keep it cold, or, however you choose to transport it. Maybe you put it in a styrofoam container. But again, good faith donation of apparently wholesome products.
Excellent. Okay.
That is really the definition that I want folks to walk away from this training, is good faith, apparently wholesome. And the way that you choose to do that needs to align with health and safety agency protocols.
Okay, that's great. Okay. The next question on a totally different topic. Can oil and grease-based waste byproducts be used for biofuels?
Yes. The engine that the biofuel gets put into needs to be converted properly to receive and to process biofuels. So if you have usually a diesel car, my friend used to have this old Mercedes that was a diesel that they easily converted to a biofuels car, and they were able to go and get biofuels that were converted from fry grease and pump up their car, and it was a pretty neat experiment that I saw happen about 15 years ago. And that's when I first became educated on biofuels. But if you can think about, diesel tractors and other kinds of vehicles that might be converted, how we can save that fry grease, which mucks up the infrastructure, our water infrastructure, when it comes to piping and all of the underground kind of water tunneling. The fats, oils, and greases should never be put down the drain. That there's another way to process that, either through the biofuels process, and they'll come and pump it out for you out of your fry grease container, or you have a company that comes and removes that for you from your property. So there's several options around that, but yes, it can be converted to run vehicles.
All right. Well, those are all the questions that have been submitted. I know we have some people watching today. Do either one of our audience members that are on here have anything specifically they'd like to ask our instructor today? And I'm going to take that as a no. And so it looks like we have gone through our questions. Stacy, I have to tell you, I really enjoyed your presentation. I feel very educated, and I appreciate that I can go and help share these ideas with many of our local restaurant owners and food processors. And we'll, of course, direct folks to watch the archived version of this video. And I'll remind those of you that are watching now, this video, along with all the other videos that we've presented in this series, are all available in archived form on the Chamber's website at smithvilletx.org, as well as on our Facebook page and on the library's Facebook page, the Smithville Public Library's Facebook as well. Stacy, again, I want to thank you so much for your presentation today.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. It's been really fun and an honor to help educate food permitted businesses, what they can do in their operations to do their part for sustainability and to hopefully save money.
All right. Thank you so much, Stacy. And that concludes our class for the day. Thanks, everybody.
All right, y'all. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.